of art. I'm Garin Hovhannisyan, the founder of Creative Armenia, an arts foundation for the Armenian people. And since our founding in 2017, we have been discovering, developing, and supporting hundreds of filmmakers, musicians, and writers and artists through 7 core programs, which run year-round. We kicked off this year, for example, by welcoming the 2021 Creative Armenia AGBU Fellows. These are our rising stars across all creative fields whom we support through a package of funding and mentorship and promotion. We're very proud of our partnership with AGBU and believe it is one of the great collaborations for Armenia's cultural future. Later in the spring, we announced the beneficiaries of our Artists for Artsakh Fund, 6 artists who are using their creative work to bring attention and recognition to Artsakh at this pivotal historic time. And today, I am proud to reveal the recipients of our 2021 Spark Grants, strategic funds for innovative creative projects that span all art fields and continents. With Creative Armenia support, these 18 artists will be bringing to life a new generation of creative work that will rise to the stages and museums of the world. These Spark Grants would not be possible without the commitment of true patrons of the arts, individuals and organizations who recognize the absolute power of creation and imagination. We're so grateful to them. And the volume of grants available this year is also made possible by the creators of the film The Promise, a film whose legacy lives on also in the new creations it has inspired and continues to support. So thank you to all of our patrons and to our community of artists. And please stay connected to Creative Armenia for so many more opportunities up ahead this year. For now, let's get right into it. The first panel of Creative Armenia Week, how to take the art world by storm. The people you're about to meet represent the very best the Armenian imagination has to offer. They have each charted their own incredible destinies and careers in world culture, and they have each played a vital role in the founding of Creative Armenia. To introduce them and to moderate the panel, please welcome Creative Armenia's VP and my own creative partner, Alec Mohibian.
Hello, everybody. Thank you all for joining us. I hope you're doing well in the latter days of the plague, and let's help each other a little bit get to the finish line. I'm really excited about talking to everyone on this panel, all of whom I've had the pleasure of meeting at one point or another, and at several other points in some cases. I'm going to go through, and of course they are Eric Bogosian, Eric Israeli, Angela Sarafi, and Serge Tankian. I'm sure you all know a lot about them already. I'm going to introduce kind of one at a time and then ask each one a question or two as I introduce them. And then at the end of these introductions, we'll take questions from all of you in the Q&A part of this app. And you can actually also vote on the questions as they come in, and I'll ask whatever catches my eye. We'll have a chance to converse, and I hope enlighten each other a little bit. The first panelist this morning will be Eric Bogosian, whom I had the pleasure of watching around my 16th birthday at UCLA, doing his Worst of Eric Bogosian show. Worst of Eric Bogosian is basically the best of the 80s. Bogosian rose in stardom in the 80s as basically a trailblazing chronicler of the decade and its sex and its drugs and its rock and roll and anxieties. He's one of those performers that once people saw would talk about forever. My parents had seen him in a little tiny theater in Hollywood in the early 80s. Maybe it was The Matrix, maybe it was another one. And they wouldn't stop talking about it. And that's why I was so excited growing up to get the chance to see him. It was like a 20-seat theater, and his sweat was flying over them through his energetic monologues of all kinds of characters that he would bring to life. His plays from that decade included Suburbia, Sex, Drugs, and Rock and Roll. He did a play called Talk Radio, which was nominated for the Pulitzer and which was turned into a film directed by Oliver Stone, starring Mr. Bogosian. And that film has really taken on a new level of resonance in recent years. I would recommend watching it if you haven't. His iconic television roles include Ruben in Ararat by Ato Migoyan, Captain Danny Ross in Law and Order, Lawrence Boyd in Billions. Most recently, he was Arno in Uncut Gems, which is another thing you must watch if you haven't. In addition to that, he's written several novels. And he took an interesting turn as a scholar when he wrote the nonfiction work Operation Nemesis, which I think came out around 2010 or somewhere like that. And I think that marked an interesting development in the career of Eric Bogosian, which has crossed so many planes. Eric, thank you so much. Eric's also a founding advisory board member of Creative Armenia. Thank you so much for joining us this morning, Eric.
Thank you, Alec. Nice to see everybody.
Yeah, my first question for you, just as a little starter, is could you kind of locate the moment where you felt either internally or externally that first big break, or the first moment where you kind of felt vindicated in your choice of mission in this world? I'm guessing it's at some point in the 80s. Was there a moment like that for you?
Well, there was a pivotal moment, which was that I had come to New York to be an actor and immediately quit. And I ended up being part of a world that existed south of 14th Street, downtown, all kinds of little loft performances and clubs. And that was where I worked. And it was a community that talked to itself. I mean, we basically made our work for each other. And there were some very interesting artists who came out of that particular scene, good friends of mine like Sonic Youth or Cindy Sherman or whatever. This was all just kind of going all over the place. And I was playing in a very small club on 8th Street or something called Club 57. And somebody from the Public Theater came by, and that was Joe Papp's place that had put Chorus Line and these huge shows up on Broadway. And they said, "Would you like to meet Joe Papp?" And I went over to his office, and he said, "I hear you do these performances. Would you do some of it for me right now in my office?" I was like, "What?" But then I realized I better do something right there then, and I did. And he started bringing me into the Public Theater, and then all of a sudden I wasn't downtown anymore. I was New York City. And so I guess that was a big pivot. And then later, when he produced the play Talk Radio, and then Ed Pressman made the movie of it, and with Oliver Stone directing, that, to be in an Oliver Stone movie, especially in that particular year, 1988, I mean, it was just, a rocket, and it had a big effect on myself as somebody really out there. That being in hand, I don't know that I really understood how to work the system in LA and showbiz and all of that. What I did know was that I had a lot more opportunities to make work from that point on, and I tried to continue to make work that was different, I guess, or testing limits or whatever. And that was very satisfying for me. In a few years ago, I did end up on this big TV show, Law and Order, and I did very well with that. And I had also developed a deep interest and a new interest in my Armenian roots. And I set about writing this book about Operation Nemesis because there wasn't a big book about it in the United States. And I didn't understand what a huge project this was I was taking. Unfortunately, I had some wonderful allies in the Armenian community Aram Arkun and Mark Mamagonian and others who assist, Ted Bogosian, who helped me research and do the project. And it was very important to who I am. I
It's
couldn't give you a long answer. I'm sorry, but
no, I actually
that's my
appreciate
way.
it. You segued, you bled right into my second question. I mean, I have many questions because you've really you've entered so many different genres and art forms almost seamlessly, including novels in the 90s and even after, and including kind of both the art, the super like cult following art world, your stage presence, and the super commercial world, the Law and Order, and these big network shows you've been on, you've been a regular on. So there's so many different questions that I hope the audience will touch upon, and if not, I'll just throw them in later on in the show. But my second question for the start was exactly what you touched on at the end. When did that little voice of the Armenian heritage that seems to speak through a little speaker inside of everybody Armenian's head at some point in his life, no matter how removed he is from the Armenian world? When did that happen for you? Or I guess we know when it happened publicly with Operation Nemesis. How do you feel that changed things for you when you heard it? If you heard it at some point later than in your career, I don't want to put words in your mouth.
I was brought up in a kind of a polarized world where my family I'm totally Armenian. Half the family comes from all from Eastern Turkey and or Western Armenia, and all from the late 19th century, early 20th century, in different important moments, the 1890s, 1915, 1916, and then finally 1922 when Ataturk really finished the job. I was always very aware of my Armenian roots, but it was a very set thing. Like, most of the family did not want to talk in detail about what had happened. My one grandfather, Megadich Jamgochin, really, he would tell me things, but they were so horrible and they were so far away. It was like, Game of Thrones or something. It was I couldn't imagine what this even was. And that's the way it's set for a long time. I mean, Armenian for me was a lot of older relatives who spoke Armenian, and it was like equation with old people. And I had a sensibility of like, I'm part of it was just like this, I don't know, I can't explain it, like mythic. And then I did Ararat with Atom, and we were on set one day, and he had replicated Van and what was happening there with the fighting in Van. It was in the movie, we're making a movie, and in the movie, there's a movie set, and there were all these extras walking around, and I shouldn't say extras, background actors, who were all dressed, and this was my grandfather's, this is the way it was when he was growing up, and all of a sudden, it just ran through me. I was transported back to that time, and I started to understand that it was a much bigger thing than anything I had known or thought about before. And I built this huge appetite for finding out, wait a minute, who am I? And, growing up in an Irish Catholic town, it was kind of like I'm this exotic thing. I'm not even a normal human being or something. And that all changed right around that time. And of course, researching the book just deepened and deepened and deepened. It continues to deepen. I have a row I hoe, and that is that the Armenians, of course, the genocide has been recognized, must be recognized, but we are not the genocide. We are so much more. Our history, our culture, and I want to be one of these American Armenians who are proud of all of it, including the medieval period or all the way back to Noah's Ark landing on Ararat. All of this is who we are, and we're an amazing people. and it's something that I want to share with my children and encourage, because there's a lot of Armenians who sort of are in the sort of gray area, you know, maybe they don't speak Armenian and or something, they don't go to church, and so I want, you know, it's so huge, and I want to be part of that. I want to encourage that, because listen, I've had to listen to Italians and Irish people talk about their heritage my whole life, and I'm done with that. I'm with who we are. We're pretty amazing.
Yeah, you know, the funny word that keeps on popping up in my mind when I think of this topic of what is Armenian and how can it be more than genocide, which we've kind of been forced to identify with just because it hasn't been recognized, and the word hadn't been recognized and still hasn't been by the people who most matter, Turks. The word is recognition. I feel like there's so much more to recognize. There's this constant theme of recognition in the Armenian world. First, you have to recognize that you're Armenian if you grew up in the diaspora like you did, like I did. Especially if you're Western Armenian and have that extra remove of time from when you were living in Armenia in your prior self. And this, like, I feel like one thing Creative Armenia is about is recognizing talent. And I think what we're trying to do now is we're trying to recognize what else it means to be Armenian and how that can really enrich the type of work you do if you're an artist. So it's recognition has kind of been on our minds. So I really appreciate that introduction, and I'm looking forward to shooting more questions your way. I will now turn the spotlight to Serj Tankian, a man I know well, a man everyone here knows well. Serj, of course, is the Grammy Award-winning lead singer of a little band of Armenians called System of a Down. He's done 5 albums with them. He's going to talk about many more he's planning to do with them, I'm sure. A range of solo albums, of course, ranging from metal to jazz to symphonies, orchestral symphonies, and most recently, I mean, in the sense of career-wise, he started composing films starting in 2015, starting with a film we made together called 1915, actually. He also has composed Intent to Destroy, Furious, The Legend of Krovat, Spitak, and I Am Not Alone, and I'm sure he's working on many others. He's also been a producer on many films, including I Am Not Alone, and most recently, Truth to Power, which is about his own journey into music and activism and Armenian madness. Of course, Serj is also a founding advisory board member, as is of Creative Armenia, as is Eric. And I'm really happy to have you here, Serj. I miss seeing you in person, but
thanks, Alec.
We'll make you for a little longer. Well, you know, I'm going to have to ask you, because the question that opens your film, Truth to Power, which came out in February, and you can all watch it online at somewhere. The question that started that film is, can music change the world? And when that film was supposed to come out, there was a very different tone to that question, because the sort of causes you had spent so much of your life, I won't say promoting, but in a way almost inspiriting, looked to be in pretty good shape. And one of them, the one of Armenian genocide recognition, just reached a new high in terms of the U.S. White House finally calling the word what it is. But Armenia's fortunes have been a little bit complicated since then, since this movie was made. So I think it's fair to ask if you still think music can change the world, or just in general, how your thoughts on the ability of artists like yourself to influence world events have changed or not changed in the last several months.
Waiting for the video to end. Okay, there you go. that is the question, and that is what we've been grappling with the film Truth to Power. But it's not just music; it's art, it's culture. Can culture change the world? Is really the question. And ultimately, as an artist, to me, I've always described it's stemming from inspiration. I think an artist is inspired by the collective consciousness, whatever content there is within the collective consciousness. And at best, we're skilled presenters, at best. And I think we're inspired by something of our times and the things that we see, the things that we experience, the things that move us. And if we are able to properly move others through that inspiration, share that inspiration, co-inspire, then it's an intuitive kind of interaction. Music specifically is an intuitive interaction. So if someone really feels that kind of right brain emotional response and reaction to a piece of music that makes them move, then they can later process the left brain lyrical content, the kind of psychological, structure of what is being said. Together, that can basically, if that itself creates some type of activism or motion, then the cycle has been, the thesis has been proven. I'll give an example. With System of a Down, we have a song called Prison Song. Talks about the 3 strikes law, talks about the injustice of the prison, mandatory minimum sentences, privatization of prisons, the racism involved in the U.S. prison system. And I think, it's like almost written.
Wait, just leave it there, okay? Sorry, very scary. Okay.
It's written almost like a thesis. So I think, when people are moved by the music and they get excited about it, but when they process what it's actually saying, if they join that movement to, change the U.S. prison system, to, reform it in some ways, then music has changed the world.
And as a second little quick teaser question, I just wanted to ask if, when you get music, you're involved in so many different things artistically and so many different projects from so many different artists. When you see a new musician or when you get music from somebody for the first time, what are you, maybe if you can put it into words, this is not a verbal medium, but what is it that you're looking for, or what is it that you kind of find in common in new musicians that makes you think, oh, these people have it? Is there a way you can kind of identify what that thing is?
Creativity. Creativity. It's simple, because most music is so much kind of sterile. It follows a formula, as have a lot of films in the past decade. And so, if it doesn't fall into that formula, and if it steps out and does something to actually grab my attention, and usually that's creativity, then I pay attention to it and I'm moved by it. But it's also the emotional impact of the music for me. Is if I listen to something and I'm moved by it, then it's talking to me beyond just auditory canal. It's really moving me. And so it's the combination of creativity, I would say, and the emotional impact.
That checks out. And we'll get back to more Serge questions in a bit. Next, I want to introduce the wonderful Eric Israelian. Eric, who I've had the pleasure of working with most recently on I Am Not Alone. Dr. Israelian is a physician, Emmy-nominated film producer, an entrepreneur who is actively involved in philanthropic efforts, connecting health, human rights, education, the arts. You all know of him to begin with, I'm sure, because he's the one who brought The Promise into the world, which drew unprecedented attention to the Armenian genocide around the world and led to the creation of the Promise Institute for Human Rights at UCLA. Has also been instrumental to the creation of Creative Armenia and many other philanthropic projects that Eric is involved with behind the scenes, in front of the scenes. He's also produced, at this point, 3 documentaries. The first was Intent to Destroy, the companion piece to The Promise, the behind the scenes kind of companion piece, which also explored the history of denial. He's a producer of I Am Not Alone. He's a producer of the recently released Francesco, about the documentary about the Pope. And he's a founding advisory board member of Creative Armenia, and he's involved in so much. And Eric, my first question for you is, you're approached with projects all the time. What are you looking for when you decide to get involved in something that you don't, have to get involved in? What is it that you're looking for in a creative project, especially a film or TV project?
First of all, I want to say thank you to you, Alec, and Garin for launching this Creative Armenia Week, and I'm so happy to see my friends Eric, Serge, and Angela on this Zoom or whatever this platform is called. Honestly, it's kind of a situation of worlds colliding again for me to see so many people who have been involved in not only The Promise but Intent to Destroy. I think a lot of people don't know that Eric Bogosian was actually led the first table read for The Promise on April 24th, 2015, at the 100th centennial, really, of the Armenian genocide in New York. A little Irish arts theater led by Terry George and Eric, and they pulled together some really good actors and launched the project. Honestly, for me, it has everything to do with, especially Armenian-related issues, it has everything to do with what the potential impact is going to be. I think of my mind, not just because of the experience with The Promise and Intent to Destroy, which was very, purposeful. Like, we were very specific about focusing on getting a social impact campaign launched in addition to the films, and really using that to partner with NGOs and other organizations in order to kind of leverage the relationships that, I've been fortunate to have over the years with friends who are not Armenian. I think many of us also come from that background where we're very blessed, as Eric said, to be Armenian, but we also have grown up in a world that is non-Armenian and have been successful in that world. So people, kind of join us. And so I've been really inspired by everybody on this panel, and I think, okay, everybody's taken their platform and used that to be able to educate people and bring people into our tent. As Eric's saying, it's not just about the genocide. The genocide is a horrible part of our history, but this is an amazing culture. So in my mind, it's like, okay, if I'm going to take time away from my family, or if I'm going to take time away from, other opportunities that come my way, it's got to be worth it for me. And that's why, obviously with the projects related to Armenian genocide recognition have been important. I Am Not Alone, working with all of you as friends and documenting a moment, a historical moment in the history of Armenia. And then with Pope Francis, the opportunity to kind of not only talk about his story, but the way he addresses problems facing him. Whenever I feel busy or I have too many things, like I get an Atlas complex because I've got too much on my shoulders, I think about the way Pope Francis deals with all the issues facing him. But of course, it was an opportunity. I'm a broken record. It was an opportunity to spend 10 minutes of the film focused on his efforts to bring awareness to the Armenian genocide and his, basically chronicle his pilgrimage to Armenia in 2016. So in my mind, a long-winded answer to your question is thinking about ways that I can try to take our culture, our community to another level, if you will, and create opportunities for other people. And that's one of the, it goes back to the founding of Creative Armenia. When you all and Garin were initially talking about this, I felt like we needed to have something like Creative Armenia as an incubator for artists and of all kinds, and all of you really, across the different domains of art. And I feel like, it's one of those things that it was worth our time, it's worth our effort, and it's bearing fruit now.
It certainly is. I mean, I can attest myself because of all the artists that whose work I see and who apply for every one of our calls for grants and everything else, all of our programs. It's been really interesting to see how more and more and different types of creators have been unearthed by Creative Armenia and by just I think the general progress of the Armenian consciousness over the last few years. I mean, I want to just add a quick little follow-up question to you, which is relevant to this, which is, as you kind of, you're friends with all of them, with everyone in the world, basically. And have you, you know everybody.
I don't have very many denialist friends, I promise you.
Yeah, well, I mean, who doesn't? But the question is, how do you kind of see the landscape shaping? And this is a psychic question. This is not like anyone knows, but as you kind of see things, as you kind of have a vision of the next 5 years of show business, let's say, what do you feel like Armenians who want to tell Armenian connected stories, how do you think that they should be responding to, I guess, crudely put it, the global marketplace that as far as you're, familiar with? Where do you think that things are going in the near future?
Well, I'll try to answer that quickly, and we can do a follow-up. But I think, first of all, there's a lot of opportunities now that didn't exist before, and a lot of opportunities to kind of share your stories on different platforms. Sure, there's going to be some consolidation. You hear the big news today about Discovery, but I feel like, that years ago, particularly when probably when Eric was making like these big leaps forward, and actually Eric brought us, I think, as Armenians into the mainstream. But those days you had a couple of studios, they made a few films a year, and we had network TV and maybe a couple of channels on cable. And now that's not the case. So I think the opportunities are out there. Obviously, it's a competitive landscape. I have a bunch of projects, with some of you even, that we're developing, and it's difficult. But I do feel like it's possible, and that wasn't quite this. I didn't feel like that was the case earlier when we got started in doing these types of projects as a community, I would say. So. It's obviously difficult to get projects funded, and that's part of the problem. But I feel like any young person trying to start out is in the game. It's not impossible. And you can even, worst case, put your project on for free for people to see, on YouTube and through social media now. So, I mean, that's not a money-making proposition, but that's a way for people to see your art. And I think it's become much more democratized than it used to be. So I know a lot of, I see some of the questions popping up. I know a lot of people want to see more Armenian stories out there. So it's up to us to make them. I think, there's a lot of other things we could be doing and sometimes should be doing, but we choose to focus on creating opportunities or sharing our stories because we have the platform. So we should.
I appreciate that. I mean, there's all these like, if you're growing up and you're Armenian and you're trying to create stuff, there are all these panels that you've probably wandered into in LA or whatever, and over the years or before kind of 2015, and they were always full of these like old timers who couldn't even muster the imitation of optimism to provide to the young who were present. They were basically saying, forget about being Armenian if you want to make it in this business. And I think it's kind of our imperative to change the tone of that and to kind of shift the lighting a little bit to not forget you're Armenian, but what can you do to make this extremely particular experience a universal one? Because after all, it's still a human one. It's just more human than many others. It's just like everybody else, only more so, as they used to say of the Jews. So our final panelist to introduce, before we open it up to questions, is the...
You saved the best for last, by the way. She's the nicest one out of all of us.
Well,
You don't know.
Yes,
I
yes,
think
that's so true.
I think that's obvious. I think that's obvious, everyone. This is Angela Sarafian. Angela is, of course, an Armenian American actress who has appeared in many successful blockbuster films and television shows, including The Twilight Saga, Buffy the Vampire Slayer, remember that one, American Horror Story. Her major roles in feature films include Magda Cibulska. I shouldn't have even. Wow, that was a risk. In The Immigrant, if you've seen The Immigrant, you remember Angela as Magda. She was, of course, Angela in 1915, the lead of 1915, opposite Simon Abkarian, another Creative Armenia Advisory Board member. She was Clementine Pennyfeather in HBO's Westworld, which really boosted her profile around the world. She was Madal in The Promise, and even more recently, Joanna in the Netflix thriller Extremely Wicked, Shockingly Evil and Vile by Joe Berlinger, friend of the group. Angela, of course, I had the great honor of working with in 1915 when I directed her in a role in which she plays basically herself, only in a historical sense. So I'm really happy that you're here, Angela, and that we can talk again, however removed. And I guess my first question for you is similar to my question to Eric Bogosian, which was, when did you feel like you broke through? I mean, whether through external recognition or through internal recognition that you're doing what you're supposed to be doing in this world. Was there a moment that you could kind of identify where you started to feel the wind at your back?
I was thinking about what it means to break through in the traditional sense. It's about when you become famous or you're recognized for the work that you do. I feel as though there were very specific moments when that happened, but I think that we're in a living art form, and in a living art form, things are always changing and evolving. So I think I've been very, very fortunate to work with incredible talent, incredible people, some of which are on this screen now. And I loved listening to everyone like Eric Bogosian, the stories that you told about how, or the earlier part of your career, you were working in this place and you were doing what you did and you were recognized by this particular person. And just that journey is what fascinates me, because I find that from the very earliest part of my career, and even pre that, I knew that I wanted to be an actor very young. I just knew that I wanted to tell stories. That was just something that was in me from a very young age, because I found that through art, I had creative license to do the things that I might have been punished for in life. So I had this opportunity to find insight into humanity, find answers to questions that I didn't know about, and evolve. And as time goes on and as the world events take place and things that we witness happening, they start to inform me as a person and the choices that I make and the opportunities that come. And I don't think they're accidents. So when 1915 came and you and Gadim had approached me, that was, I think, a beautiful serendipitous moment for me to actually play an Armenian woman in this specific way. When Westworld arrived shortly after, oh, what is this? And we've got a video.
Everything.
This is just meant to play, I think, in the background as you keep talking. This is just a trailer for 1915.
Oh, okay. Well,
yeah.
It's very pretty. I haven't seen it in a while. We were shooting at the Los Angeles Theater here, and I think that's what it was called, the Los Angeles Theater in downtown Los Angeles. And it was just kind of incredible to so what I'm basically saying is that when Westworld came as well, they're not accidents. When The Promise came, it was so interesting. The Hubbards were having a meeting with another actress at my agency, and my agent had seen this script and said, you have to put yourself on tape this weekend. They don't want to see you. You just do it. And I fought every step of the way, and casting directors were changed. People were changed. creatives didn't think that I was right. Like the Hubbard said, no, she's not right. We're not looking for an Armenian girl that looks like this or this type of person. And yet it worked out beautifully, because if I had played, let's say, the lead part, if I had gotten it, I wouldn't have been able to do it. I got the part that I should have played. And so I think there's a beautiful synchronicity in the arts that we do. I don't think there is an accident in the roles that come. And so in that process, I guess the breakthrough moments are when I did a Singular commercial and people recognized me. You know, is that the breakthrough, when people are stopping down the street and going, hey, I know you? And I'm like, yeah, that's me, I guess, you know, selling Singular. And then the next moment is doing Westworld or doing The Promise, which was maybe the dearest thing because it was so close to my heart to be on that set and to actually witness that kind of massive production, bringing light to a moment that we have all heard about. But like both Erics were saying, that doesn't make us who we are. Armenians are not just the genocide. There's so much culture, there's so much art, there's so much soul, there's so much love. And I am seeing the questions on the side. So I go, we do have stories to tell. It's just that it's like when I started in this business, they said, your face, you're so exotic. What is Armenian? Maybe you should change your last name to Angela Sarah. Not, yes. Yeah, Eric. And change your last name, get your nose done, get your chin implanted, change everything so you will fit into what a lot of people look like now. You know, you've got the cliche of these kind of Angelina Jolie-like looks. And I go, but the beauty is in the imperfection. It's the imperfection of the outside telling us you have to have big lips and a small nose and this and that to look beautiful. And I say, this is my heritage right here. and these eyes. I'm not going to erase this, as I'm not going to erase my last name, because that is who I am. So what I could say is I'm still growing. I don't think that the breakthrough has happened for me, honestly. I think that I've been very lucky that I've worked with beautiful people. I am so grateful every time I get to be on a set and I get to bring life to a role. And so with all this said, I'm just, you know, I came on to do this because I have such respect for the people on the screen. I've been such a big fan of Eric Bogosian's work. His work in Uncut Gems killed me. I mean, Serj Tankian, you know, ever since I was a little girl, like I was listening to your music and walking down the streets in Hollywood. And Eric Israeli.
That means you're old, brother.
No. He was.
Hey, watch it.
I mean, he's young. You know, I'm just.
I know. I'm just kidding.
Just busting my balls, Eric. So yeah. So, you know, I don't know. I digress. So basically, I'm just thinking that art, if we're talking about art and the stories that we want to tell, it usually comes from our heart. And you bring all of yourself to tell those stories. I was trying to kind of cover some of the questions that they were asking. I think one of the questions
I'll pose them starting now.
Can I just add something to what Angela said? First of all, I mean, she's incredible, and I was so happy that she wanted to be in our film, and I can just tell you, you know, I agree with her. Things happen for a reason, and you have to put yourself out there for everybody that's in the audience paying attention, because, you know, when I saw Angela's audition and, you know, I basically took it to our team, I was like, she's in the movie, you know, and I said that, you know, she's also also a great actress and a highly visible Armenian actress in, you know, our modern age, where, you know, she's in the movie. So figure it out. So one way or the other. And, you know, I think there's a lot of, if you look at this panel, you know, like I mentioned Eric's involvement, and Eric was a trusted advisor, and not only was he in Intent to Destroy, but, you know, he had already worked with Terry George. Serj, you know, helped oversee the music, and he created a beautiful version of Sorry Sirin Yar for the film. And then with Intent to Destroy, Serge and Joe Berlinger connected, and Serge ended up doing the beautiful score for Intent to Destroy. Joe Berlinger met Angela on the set of The Promise, and then Angela ended up being in his film. And Joe's opportunity for that film even connected with some of our relationships in the producing world, like Ara Kashishian. So I do feel like we created, there's like a family tree connected to that project, but that's an example of what we can do going forward as a community, which is why, I believe so much in Creative Armenia.
Yeah, the family tree concept, I think is a nice image to have in mind when we think of the unpredictable branches that can come from the work we do. It's not just about like what you see right in front of your eyes. Well, thank you everybody for kind of warming us up here. And
can I throw in one thought?
Always.
I'm sorry, Alec, but I of course I'm loving all this stuff coming my way right now. It's beautiful. But you said something about, an artist introducing us to the bigger world. And it's important that we acknowledge the artists, and there are many, I'm not going to get to everybody who came in the 20th century, but particularly I want to mention in terms of writing, William Saroyan. They just had a thing on a PBS about Hemingway, who was obviously one of the great popular writers in the 20th century. William Saroyan was bigger than Hemingway. And William Saroyan also introduced people to our culture. And I highly recommend that you go and you read some of his short stories. He's one of the most amazing writers ever. Might have been a lunatic, but he was great. And in terms of acting, Simon Abkarian blows me away. And if you've never seen Army of Crime, you must see this movie about Armenian resistance during World War II. And I know I can go on and on, but I mean, Charles Aznavour, who was one of our great, pushed the Armenian cause during his lifetime, and who I got to work with, obviously, in Ararat. I'm not correcting you, Alec. I just want to expand the thing, because of course we're talking about us today, but this is an ongoing tradition. And one of the things is that we're very creative people. I mean, one of the aspects of our heritage is our poetry. Great Armenian poets going all the way back into medieval time, but also in the 1920s in Paris. And you can go look that stuff up too. I have gigantic volumes of Armenian. Of course, I'm reading it in English, but anyway, just wanted to throw that. I had to say Saroyan's name. I just had to.
I'm glad you do, because I mean, honestly, I'm the one who usually has to be kind of wrangled out of the past, where I tend to dwell. First of all, Simon and Angela's fictional name in 1915, last name was Mamoulian. So we have Ruben Mamoulian also shout out to while we're doing this, and whose films really stand the test of time. I mean, just look them up and find the ones you can find and watch Ruben Mamoulian's films. And he started in theater. And he was a genius. And there's another writer that I only recently discovered named Kostan Zaryan. I'm not going to get into him, but as we're name dropping, we're going to name drop. I would say absolutely read Kostan Zaryan's books, The Traveler and His Road, and Bankup and The Bones of the Mammoth, chiefly because not only he survived the Armenian genocide, but he chronicled the survivors and the early years of Soviet Armenia and the kind of craziness of the world at that time in a way that is truly world-class and first-rate. There's a lot of Armenians that people don't even know about in history. And, part of our job here at Creative Armenia is to resurrect them, at least for now, to people's attention. So I'm always happy when someone has an artistic love from the past that they can talk about with animation. So anytime in my book, I'm going to ask a few questions from the audience, which I think some of you have been able to see. I'll start with Ani Ani Minasian's question, who she says it's been disappointing to see the lack of Armenian stories on TV and film, and to see Armenian characters portrayed only as mobsters or other stereotypes. What do all the panelists, I guess, why do you think this is, and what can be done to change it? What can be done in your minds to expand the range of Armenia relevant, I hate the word representation, but that's the only one that's occurring to my dull mind at the moment, on film and TV?
Well, if I may offer something, there's something my brother and I wrote that was something that needed to be told. It was something from our hearts. It's a very personal story. And I think that the way to change the system is to start by creating it from within. So I think that it's like when I started in this business, women tend to play prostitutes on, I don't know, CSI New York, or, these are the roles that you get. And there are cliches to how people see minorities. Those are the Russians or whoever they are. So that's how the industry is. But now the industry is very much shifting. And you can see, like, Seb Ohanian is a wonderful friend of mine, and he's a producer, and he's making very interesting stories, and the people that he's working with are also minorities. So we have the ability to change the stories. We have the ability to change that narrative. And I think it comes from us first. So I hope that answers that question.
Does anyone else?
You have to make it. You have to make it. Right, you have to write those, so people understand that the perspectives are not just stereotypical ones. And this has been going on for a long time with lots of different ethnic groups. We just happen to be, really aware of it now. I mean, the sad reality is I used to like those mob characters because I was like, wow, at least we got an Armenian name in like a movie, and now it's kind of like, okay, now we've evolved. But I think people have to be at the table at some point, which means that, the best time to plant a tree, I say, is 20 years ago. So we need to get people who are writing and who are creating and who are acting and who are eventually in those decision-making positions. Because I can tell you, when we were making The Promise, the people in decision-making positions had no interest in irritating Turkey or Turkish business interests, and so it didn't matter because, as you said, I mean, I know everybody, and without even reading a word, without even reading one line of the script, they're like, oh, we can't touch this. On the flip side, I think every ethnic group thinks that their stories are like the most interesting. Jim Giannopoulos is one of my best friends, and he's the CEO of Paramount. And he says every week he gets a script from somebody that says, we need to write a script about the story of Archimedes. Because Archimedes, like, everybody wants to see the story of Archimedes, So once you're in that position, you can decide to greenlight the story of Archimedes or William Saroyan. Like, we have to get at the table. That's what I think. And we have to keep fighting for it.
I want to add that, don't sleep on the mobsters, because I've noticed that those stereotypical characters that, like, intellectually we are disappointed by, sometimes sometimes they're much more interesting, or a much more powerful way into the consciousness than characters that are nicer and better, but not actually in any recognizable way Armenian in any way whatsoever, except their names in fiction or in TV. I mean, I see that a lot too, where I don't know that it's more meaningful to have some random lawyer name with an Armenian name in a TV show than it is to have an actual character whom one can like or be interested by, who maybe is more of a stereotypical job, So I think it's funny how these things work. It's not necessarily a bad thing to think in those terms, in my personal opinion. Serge, do you have any thoughts on? Like, this thing that hangs in everyone? I think everyone has the same question, which is like, how to influence the existence of Armenians into the mainstream storytelling landscape,
more writers, more directors, more producers that are Armenian, that want to tell the stories, direct, all of it. Composers, I mean, ultimately, Angela and Eric said it. Eric Israelian said it already, but that's pretty much it. We need to be at the table. Some amazing writers, Eric Bogosian on our panel, Eric Nazarian, our friend Eric Nazarian is a great screenwriter, and we need more people like that to change the narrative toward a more positive Armenian, kind of influence in Western media.
And of course, Sevo Hanya, whom Angela brought up, he'll be on a panel later this week, so check that out. Did you have a follow-up, anybody? I'm sorry, I didn't
Yeah, I'll throw in. I mean, I'll give you some insight into the story can now be told. What my secret plan was with Operation Nemesis when I originally became aware of this. First of all, there was the fake story that Solomon Tetlarian was just this student who happened to be in Berlin and gunned down Talat Pasha, the man pretty much responsible for the genocide with his cohorts. And I was going to write a movie about it. And then I started doing research and I found out that there was this much larger conspiracy, Operation Nemesis, and it really, I mean, in terms of history, astounding, because these are not, people say, oh, it's just like Munich. It's nothing like Munich. Munich was run, I mean the Spielberg movie. Munich was a bunch of secret agents going after the people who had done the Olympic terrorism acts. These were normal businessmen in New England and upstate New York who decided that they were going to avenge the Armenian genocide. So at any rate, they effectively did do that. They knocked off most of the leaders. I knew that this was a story that had to be really, I mean, it's an incredible story. I don't know that I really rose to the task. There was so much to talk about in the book, and I ended up telling about a lot of other things besides that specific story. But I was sort of thinking of it as I went into it as a Trojan horse. I was going to get people interested in this incredible action story of people gunning each other down in Berlin and Rome and Constantinople. And because once you got pulled into that story, then I was going to deliver the story of the genocide, which to some degree I did with the book. I'm just not a really flashy writer on that. I didn't write an action book. I wrote a scholarly book, actually, which I think I'm very proud of. But my point is just that this was my plan of how to introduce an idea that had been not only kind of not recognized, but consciously suppressed by the Turkish government over the 20th century. And this was what I was thinking. So that was my specific agenda. I don't know that it was entirely successful. Now we come to, since the book came out in 2015, I've been asked innumerable times, probably from everybody of this group right here and everybody else, when is the movie? When is there a movie? I mean, the first thing is it's an action story, so of course it must be a movie. I don't see it that way at all. I see it as something actually more complex than that. But right. I worked with some people on trying to figure out how, Alex Denolaris and others, trying to figure out how can we do this. Pitching it was, it's not easy. I mean, I can get the thing started someplace, but I'm too aware of how things work in Hollywood. I don't want to start something and have it just end up on some shelf somewhere in an office and never get produced. So I'm always thinking, how do we make it so it happens? That's what I want to have happen. It's not about money. It's not about all this other stuff. And so now we have the problem. How do we sell this story? And there are issues there. It is a period piece, is expensive. It is about people who people are not familiar with. I mean, talking about archetypes, that's the meat and potatoes of movies and books, and well, particularly movies. A guy steps in, talking about these Armenian gangsters and all these TV shows. Well, they have assumed the role of an archetype that the audience now is familiar with. Oh, there's these guys from Armenia. They're really badass. And that's what an Armenian is. People aren't that interested in all the complexities. If you're an incredibly skilled writer, then maybe you can draw somebody into your story. I mean, that's the thing that is the I think, there's an underlying soul of all of this. Certainly in Serge's work, this is there. Empathy, this empathy, this bedrock empathy for other human beings, not just Armenians, is built into us because of our own history. In that way, Armenianism is infiltrating humanity, not just, are we going to tell the story of what happened to our people? One last thought is that at any given moment in time, here we are in 2021, there are innumerable artists all making work. We don't know who's going to be the artist that somebody will be looking back on 75 years from now and say that was a great artist. But I'll tell you this for sure, it's 99% of the artists working today are not going to be those artists. So, when somebody comes along who really has the skill, like a Saroyan, who can somehow communicate to a huge audience their view of life, that's very, 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 very rare. And to ask if that's going to be in conjunction with the story of Armenians or our Armenian experience, it's a big ask. All we can say is that of all these, and particularly on this platform we're in right now with Creative Armenia, there's many, 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 many artists out there right now watching. Each one has to ask themselves, what is my goal? What am I, like Angela was talking about? I've got to say that I'm aiming for that. And no one's gonna give you that target. You have to make that target yourself. And if I noticed you gave an award, a grant to Gore, and he's a wonderful artist, and it's great. He's got a vision. He's going to keep going, and we're going to keep seeing. You never know who's going to be that person. I mean, we are all propelled by our own particular thing. Anyway, I've gone on too long, but
no. It's always great. Yeah, go ahead, Eric.
I just want to add one thing, just Eric, as you said that, it also made me think, let's give a little credit to all of you and the people who are actually doing it now, because we're punching above our weight, guys. I think you think about it as Armenians, we are focused on our nationality, our ethnicity, our heritage, but the rest of the world doesn't really know us. And I think the fact that we have already such a visibility, have established such a visibility, is a testament to this drive that, Eric and Angela were also talking about, that we have within us. And we have to just keep telling our stories. And, I think that it's really amazing considering the small population we have in the world, where we have a William Saroyan, we have a Serge Tankian, Eric Bogosian, Angela Sarafian, Cher Sarkisian,
Moderna.
We have Moderna, Noubar Afeyan. Yeah, we like Charles Aznavour, as you said, one of the greatest entertainers of the 20th century, and some people would say the greatest. He's Armenian, and he was proud to be Armenian. I think what we don't want to lose, which happens, I have so many people who are often asking me, can you introduce me to so and so? It's like, if they don't really care about being Armenian, why am I going to introduce you? That's not what I want people who are also proud of their heritage, who are going to lay it on the line. And one thing I'll say to everybody out there, it sometimes comes back to hurt you. So we need people like, I think, us, who don't care. It's like, if it's going to cost me opportunities, so be it, because we are going to fight to get our stories out there. And we're not going to basically, bow down. And I know Eric Bogosian doesn't bow down. So I think he's of all of us here, him and Serge really blazed the trail for us. So appreciate that.
He doesn't even bow at the end of one of his performances. He just waves and walks off the stage.
Mic drop. And
mic drop. And so I want to, I will add, very briefly, that it's interesting from what Eric Bogosian was saying. Sometimes you don't know what story you're actually telling until you start to tell it, and you realize what you thought you were telling is not actually what you were telling. So I think the lesson about having your ears tuned to the surprises of your own work are an important one, because you tend to be like, I need to tell an Armenian genocide movie. No, that's not what you're actually telling. You're actually telling a story about somebody, probably yourself in some form, or someone And that sort of, you should be open to that revelation in the process. I think it makes for the work more personal and urgent. So, you know, as a little cherry on that, that would be my addition to that. And it's really interesting to see what every single project, how it takes on that arc. So I'm wishing you the best on Operation Nemesis, whether, you know, the film version, whatever it ends up being, miniseries, it could be any number of things. It's such a fascinating story.
We're with you, bro. However we can help,
Yeah.
we're on board.
Yeah, for sure.
There's a question from Nadek Minasian that I'll kind of channel to Angela, because I suspect that she has faced it. She and Eric Bogosian have faced it more than anyone, being both actors, which is, Nadek asks, do you have any stories about facing discrimination for your nationality in your workplace? And I will embellish that question to ask more like, you know, how have you navigated this, being who you are? And you touched upon it, Angela, in your opening remarks, but like, how have you navigated it in circumstances where in many cases it's actively discouraged? And do you have any, you know, direct stories you'd like to share from that?
Well, I kind of did touch upon it. I think the industry is changing a lot. I think that there is much more room now to really look at people less as terrorists, if you're from the Middle East, you know, to have shows like Rami and to go, wow, you know, even if they're Muslim, there's so many similarities between the mom and my Armenian mom, and just the mentality and learning about another culture and the heart and soul of it. So I think the industry is very much changing. Like I said earlier, it was very different when I started. I don't know, Eric, would you like to?
Yeah, well, I'm glad you brought up the point of things changing, because it's on two levels. One, the look and the kind of stories that get told, as you just mentioned. I mean, I was amazed, like when Lost came out, and there's a number of actors coming out of South Asia that, you know, I'm like, wow, that was never a look that was acceptable before. But also the hegemony of world culture where, okay, why is Armenian not known as well? Well, because we've grown up in an atmosphere of, you know, you go to college and it's like, it's the English literature, it's the French literature, it's the Russian literature. Well, guess what? Those are all the big empires. Today, people are starting to be more open, particularly with the African culture, but also in Asian culture. And slowly we're saying, oh, wait a minute, just because a country is a smaller country doesn't mean that they don't have fantastic art to contribute to the world. In terms of the actual, I mean, I have stories. I'll briefly, when I was first signed to the William Morris Agency, you know, my agent in LA took me out to the Grill, which was where the Morris agents hung out on Rodeo Drive. And he sat me down. He says, I think you have a real future if you straighten your hair, fix your nose, and change your last name. And my grandmother she said, don't be like Mannix. Mike Connors, who changed his last name. And and it was kind of like a line in the sand, as Angela was describing. And for a while it was, I mean, I was on TV talk shows and things around the time of talk radio coming out, late 80s. And, you know, I'm literally being introduced by somebody onto a show, and they're like, and we have Eric, how do you say that name? I mean, how insulting to do that to me. And by the way, I want to say something, and this is controversial, but I want to say that, you know, racism or ethnicism against people, it's always present, and in some very almost invisible ways. The movie Borat, which makes fun of Eastern European people who live in little poor villages. I'm sorry, but those guys on Borat and Borat kind of look like the people in the world that our people come from. And for some reason, you can't make fun of certain groups anymore, but you can make fun of this group. And especially when they go to the village and the guy is, you know, having sex with his sister or whatever the hell the deal is. This is not good stuff. This is putting down a group of people particularly the people of Eastern Europe and all the way extending into the Caucasus. And like I say, that is not something people want to hear. I think he's a terrific actor, and he's done some amazing work and very accomplished. But Borat is too easy, and it's taking punches at people who, I mean, for if nothing else, the people of Eastern Europe after the communist fiasco, and which includes Armenia, are impoverished, and you know, they don't have a choice about the way they live in these very poor villages.
The other problem with Borat, though, is really that it was actually inspired by Aliyev, and it's not. That's not mentioned. If that was just more prominent, I think it would take a lot of the pressure off of, you know. I mean, so
Ken is speaking Armenian in the first Borat, which was thrilling to hear. But
right,
he's
Right
awesome.
after he did a 69 with Sasha.
he's a refugee from Baku who's speaking. Yeah, that's that. I mean, everyone knows that's the real inspiration for Borat. So it's too bad that wasn't explicitly stated. I'm gonna, we're running out of time, so I want to ask one more question. I'm glad you touched upon that, Eric, because that's relevant to Dana Walrat's question. But I wanted to ask one more question just to everyone. Maybe beginning with Serj Tankian, because he's so active in every kind of sphere constantly. And I know he's got answers for this. Ani Kazanjian asks, what are you doing to help new Armenian creatives, like, personally make their mark in the art world? I mean, I know we've heard a lot from Eric Israelian, because that's his whole thing. But for the rest of you, is there any kind of little personal details or facts or stories you'd like to drop in about your activities in that regard?
I always get stuff from artists both in Armenia and the diaspora, Armenian and non-Armenian as well, obviously. And I always, try to give them some fast feedback as much as I can. If I know someone that would be interested, I try to actually make connections. But if nothing else, I try to at least advise when I can, so that it's kind of like I realize. I mean, one of the reasons that Creative Armenia is around is to make those connections, actually, and that's one of the reasons I was interested in joining the board, and because we have this incredible talent in Armenia and around the Armenian diaspora, and we have to connect each other in ways where if there's a talent that needs distribution, or if a talent that needs management or agency or whatever, try to make some of those connections with whatever connections we've made. We don't have the world's connections either. Eric Israelian does, but but do what we can, and generally just advice or hearing a demo, and I think, look, I realize I was there. I was in that situation when I was younger, and I wanted people to hear the music and give me some type of feedback, because you're in this insular world as an artist creating all this stuff, and you want to know, are people interested in this? Does this move you? Is this shit? Whatever it is, right? Like, you want some type of feedback, and I'm happy to do that. Like, I enjoy doing that.
Well, let me just quickly say, because I didn't want to be the first to answer this question, but all of you are very involved in Creative Armenia, and the very mission of Creative Armenia is to do exactly this, which is help new Armenian creatives make their mark in the world, from soup to nuts. So, that's something that that's a given. You've all been spending tons of time mentoring our fellows, our network members, doing all kinds of cross connections. And if you aren't familiar with Creative Armenia's work and you're watching this, I recommend signing up to our email list, going to our website, keeping a tab on all of our programs and our calls for submissions and everything, because you'll probably come into some form of interaction if you have a project that's viable with one of these panelists at some point. So that's, this is our institution. Yeah.
I was just going to say, also supporting the organization. I think an organization like this, to be able to give out grants, needs to get funds from somewhere. And so I think this is a worthwhile destination for your philanthropy. And I think that, that's why I think we all support it, because we feel like this is a good incubator and creates opportunities for people. And, you know, and when people kind of approach me, I often first say, let's go through Creative Armenia because I support Creative Armenia, you know, and that's an organization that I believe in, and I know they have a process. And I also think just be genuine. You know, that's one little thing I wanted to add, because I know you have a whole other panel on, you know, kind of breaking in or whatever. But, you know, as we joked about, you know, Sarah said, you know, those relationships come from a lifetime of just building, you know, friendships and being genuine. You know, there's a lot of people who have been doing it for a lot longer than us that I think are not, you know, they're kind of in the usual kind of Hollywood stereotypical disingenuous cycle, and they're not really out to help other people. It's just, and it's clear. So hopefully, I think when people see, you know, young people or even, you know, people who are more established trying to make it and are really selling their wares, but with a genuine authenticity, I think it's much more likely to be successful.
And I encourage everyone who operates in anything within the show business realm to join our panel on Friday with the more Hollywood people, agents and producers like Seb and so on, where the topic is breaking into Hollywood, and where I'll try to get them to provide some nuggets of advice or insight on that very tricky path. It's never easy to get like practical advice in a generic way and something like that, because one of the things about show business is how everyone kind of has a different story. I mean, even if you on this panel, even if you're talking to two actors, the way each of them made it is so different every single time that it's hard to have kind of broad advice, except for in terms of your habits and in terms of just your general way of approaching everything you do, which can be, I think, that can be usefully informed by good advice. So I encourage you all to join on Friday. I want to thank all of you for being here. I mean, there's a comment about how beautiful Angela is. Angela is so stunning. I can't believe anyone wanted to change the way she looks. Crazy. So I think that's worth adding. Are there any last thoughts? I mean, I don't want to, are there any thoughts that have occurred to any of you? I want to thank you all again also for all the work you do with Creative Armenia. This conversation can go on forever, and I hope it does in one form or another and in person before too long. And I'll let you all have the last words and then thank everyone for joining and wrap it up.
I was just going to add one thing. When I look back at Armenian cinema from the past, you know, in the 60s and the 50s, and even like The Color of Pomegranate, and the risks that people were taking, and how things changed politically and the country became independent, and the way that people were kind of just the situation let artists, in any situation we can always find hope, I guess is what I'm saying. And even what happened last year, it was just incredibly disillusioning for me, because I realized that in a lot of ways we are alone in this world, but we have each other. And if we have each other and we embrace who we are, then we can look back to Yerisha Charens and Tigran Mansourian and Charles Aznavour, and you can look at all these incredible artists, and we build from there, like William Saroyan and everyone here. So I guess I hope that cinema also reflects the world that we want to be living in, the Armenia that we want to have. That it's no longer just soap operas, Armenian soap operas, but it's really about going back to The Color of Pomegranate, going back to telling these stories, and not being ashamed of our roots, but celebrating them. So that's all. That's what I wanted just to add.
Maybe in the case of Color of Pomegranate by Sergei Parajanov, also not being ashamed of our lunacy, to call back to an earlier theme.
Yes, absolutely. Artists are crazy.
Artists are crazy. Well, does anyone else have a last word? Because that's a good note to end on, I think. Artists are crazy and Armenians are crazy, but crazy in a profound way.
But we love them. We love them.
Yeah.
Yes, we do. And so does the world. They just have to be aware that we exist. So thank you all for joining and for continuing to exist. And thank you to the audience as well. I tune in tomorrow at the same time for panel number 2, I'm not sure exactly which one it is. I think it might be with Adam and Arsene and Garin. And see you on all week. We have a panel every day each week at the same time. And I'll see you all personally on Friday. So take care and make great art.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Okay.